Hi everyone. We're here to talk about this week's program. This is a program I've been excited about for a long time. We're bringing back to town one of Richmond's great stars, composer Mason Bates, who has achieved wonderful fame as a young composer in the United States and around the world. And we're going to be performing his relatively new violin concerto. So I'm joined today by Mason from his studio in California, I believe is where you are. Is that right, Mason?
That's right, Northern California.
Wonderful. Well, as I said, we're going to be featuring your wonderful violin concerto with a wonderful violinist, Anna Kiko Myers. And we'll talk about Anne in just a second. But I wanted to ask you, first of all, you've become pretty well known through your work that has combined electronics with the sound of the traditional symphony orchestra. You've done a lot of other things as well, but in some ways that's kind of defined you as a composer in the wider world. And yet, this piece, quite specifically, does not include any of those electronic elements. I thought it'd be fun if you could talk a little bit about how you reached that conclusion and how your work with electronic sounds has influenced your work with the orchestra.
Well, I'm always looking for new sounds, and that can happen through electronic sounds or through, synthesizing, 300-year-old instruments. There are millions of ways, infinite ways that you can take the orchestra as this kind of synth and combine all of these old instruments to create new sounds. I really wanted in this violin concerto to keep electronics out of the mix because you have a real challenge, even in a purely acoustic violin concerto, to keep it balanced appropriately. You've got a 18-inch instrument in the form of your solo violin that needs to project over the entire orchestra. And many violin concertos have challenges keeping that balance working. I thought that having an electronic component would introduce just too much uncertainty and variability into the mix. Nonetheless, I've been forever changed by my experience working with electronic sounds, and so whenever I go back to a purely acoustic situation, I find myself still thinking with that kind of producer's mentality in searching for new sounds. For example, the string section in this piece plays a lot of percussive effects. People tapping on cellos, tapping on basses, sometimes slapping the instruments to suddenly turn the string ensemble into a kind of percussion ensemble. There are some exotic percussion instruments. There are some Thai gongs and some Tibetan prayer bells. So there really are a lot of different sounds in the orchestra that, while not necessarily evoking electronic sounds, are pushing past the perhaps more traditional constraints of the orchestra. And that's very much a result of my work with electronica.
Let's talk about Anne for a minute, because she's, of course, one of the great violinists playing today, Anna Kiko Myers. And she and I have collaborated before and had a wonderful time. And I wanted to ask about how you began to work together on this concerto, the circumstances of its commissioning, but then to talk a little bit more about how that relationship works between a composer and a performer.
Well, what's interesting about Anne is that when I wrote this piece for her a year and a half ago, it was premiered last December, I actually had known her for quite a long time, and I'd even written some cadenzas for her for the Beethoven Violin Concerto.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's...
I didn't know that.
There's this little history of composers writing cadenzas for the Violin Concerto so that, they can explore a contemporary composer's response to the concerto.
Yeah.
And so that kind of got our feet wet. But I'd actually seen Anne many times and was struck by two elements of her playing. One is her absolute kind of fiery nature, and that is very much a part of her personality. I mean, she's quite a firecracker. Mm-hmm. The other is that she has this, uncanny ability to just float a melody very touchingly over an orchestra, and you can even hear that in some of her recent recordings, such as the Bach Air recording she released. And so when writing this piece, I really wanted to have solo part that encapsulated that dichotomy at the very kind of core of the piece.
And actually, you've done that masterfully because you capture those two elements so beautifully. Moments when she just soars over the orchestra, and really some incredibly beautiful writing in that regard. Also, kind of a related question is that more often than not, in today's world, a composer will hear a first performance of a piece and the piece goes away forever. And having the benefit of repeated performances is a nice luxury. And you've been able to have, how many performances thus far? I'm not quite sure off the top of my head.
Well, of this piece, let's see, it was premiered in Pittsburgh, it's gone to National, it's gone to Detroit, Chicago is going to play it.
That's right.
Just a short time after you all, and I believe there are a couple other things on the docket, and that's really very much a tribute to Anne. You know, it's one thing to have a composer get a piece programmed. As you know, being a composer, it's not easy for any new piece to get programmed. But then if you have a soloist involved, it kind of takes an orchestra having to be familiar with both elements, and so in a way it can make it even more difficult, and certainly smooth the way for this to happen in a variety of places. And I'm just so thankful that she was so proactive about getting this a real life after the premiere.
Yeah. Have the repeated performances changed anything along the way?
Well, you know, certainly in any premiere there are changes, and I would say that's especially the case with a concerto, where you're constantly surprised at, oh, I thought I had orchestrated this in such a way that the violin could always be heard. And it was amazing to me that even with that explicit goal from the beginning of the piece, I really wanted to have her audible, which seems normal, but is actually quite a problem with a lot of contemporary concertos. I still had to adjust quite a bit. I think by the time we got to the London Symphony recording in September, we had pretty much had it set. And the nice thing is that coming into Richmond, we're bringing the piece that has hopefully worked out quite a lot of its initial kinks.
Well, we're really excited about the piece coming, and we're especially excited about you coming. This, of course, was your home, where you grew up, and you know, I think it'd be, we all want to welcome you home in a wonderful and beautiful fashion. But tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up here, and what launched you on this wonderful career.
Well, the Richmond Symphony was such a key part of my musical education. I mean, really, without two things, I certainly wouldn't have, you know, become a composer probably. One was my music teacher, Hope Armstrong Erb, at St. Christopher's School, who is just one of those very special teachers that many people in the world, you know, might encounter in their lives that you know, really have changed everything for them. And the other was going to concerts at the Richmond Symphony. At that time, George Manahan was the conductor, and you know, I knew nothing about zero, and I don't think I really understood how lucky I was at that time to have such a passionate advocate for new music conducting the Richmond Symphony. He would bring in you know, quite a lot of new music, you know, music that's modern, say, you know, Bartok and Stravinsky, but even we're talking new music like George Pearl, I mean, fairly obscure, you know, new American music. And I learned a lot about not only just the orchestra's sound, but I think I learned something about that symphonic space. There really isn't a lot of listening that goes on anymore. I mean, I sound like an old man, but it's true. People don't really listen to music in the same way. You know, they don't. Even some of the music I love, electronica, you know, will just kind of be playing as a kind of foreground, background in clubs, or maybe while you're cooking or in the car. The symphonic space is one of those rare places where you go and you listen in a way that completely consumes your attention. The Richmond Symphony has been the orchestra for me since I was very little, that I've always kind of thought of. I would go with my mom, and we both didn't know much about it, and it really educated me. So I'm very thankful to the symphony, and it's been great coming back and working with you, and it's going to be incredible to work a second time with you. So it's pretty poignant for me to come back and have this experience.
Well, we're all very excited, as I said, about having you here and sharing this, as you put it, symphonic space. It's a wonderful term. And so we'll look forward to some wonderful concerts this weekend. Thanks.
Great. I can't wait.
Thanks, Mason.